The long-running public inquiry into the contaminated blood scandal of the 1970s and 80s has been hearing its closing statements. It's now believed that about 30,000 people were infected with HIV or hepatitis C after receiving blood transfusions or taking a drug imported from the US to control haemophilia. The inquiry has taken evidence from 370 witnesses. Its recommendations are expected later this year. Our health reporter Jim Reid told us more.
We just had the actual final comments from the judge, Sir Brian Langstaff, who's been chairing this inquiry. So now essentially that the hearing part of the inquiry is over. He made some interesting points. One thing he said was we were expecting a final report with recommendations from the inquiry in the summer. It looks like that's now being put back to at least the autumn. And one reason he talked about needing extra time was because if someone is criticised, officially criticised by the inquiry, it's called the maximalisation process, they have to be given notice so they can respond. And he made it clear in this final statement that people would be criticised, which I think many victims and many families of people who've lost their lives will be thankful to hear. So we've got that process. And as we've said before, various witnesses in this whole process have talked about what other action could be taken, most notably Andy Burnham, now the Mayor of Manchester, of course, but was a former Labour Health Secretary. And when he gave evidence, he talked about maybe corporate manslaughter charges being necessary in the future. So certainly, even though this part of the inquiry is over, I don't think you've seen the last of the people and organisations really being potentially brought to account.
That's our health reporter Jim Reid. We've also been hearing from the campaigner Joseph Petey, who was at the inquiry. He's a haemophiliac who found out he'd been infected with hepatitis C and HIV via contaminated blood when he was 17 years old.
Just heard the last of the oral hearings and Sir Brian's closing remarks. It's been a long wait, and we now wait with great anticipation what Sir Brian has to say in his report, and perhaps with some trepidation whether the UK government will finally deal with this matter, or whether they will continue to kick it down the road as they've done up until now, and as they've done with other inquiries. What we've heard this afternoon, and it perhaps reflects the intransigence of the government and their failure to make any clarifying statements in the closing hearings, was Sir Brian's intention to publish another interim report before his final report, and we are hoping for that by Easter. We hope that it will spur the government into some form of action, perhaps with additional interim payments, perhaps recognising some of the elements that haven't been recognised so far, so perhaps children that lost parents, parents that lost children. But then, of course, finally, maybe in the autumn we will get the final report, and then it remains to be seen what the government will do about that, what the recommendations are, and whether they will set about correcting some of the issues, so substantial compensation. I think Sir Brian has the opportunity, if not to say that there should be criminal prosecutions, then to at least point the way to the way that they should be dealt with.
Joseph Petey, who had been at the inquiry.